Hello, my name is Frederick Griefer and I am the Director of Grants Management for the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Native American Programs. I would like to thank you for your viewership of the FY 2017 Indian Community Development Block Grant Program Notice of Funding Availability Training. Roberta Humans, our longtime ICDBG point of contact, has retired, and Monique Wisdom has taken over leadership of the program. She has worked tirelessly with various internal and external stakeholders to get the NOFA published early enough this year to allow tribes additional time to apply for the program and for area offices to review submitted applications. And she will be guiding you through the rest of the training. Thank you again for your viewing this training, and I will now turn the floor over to Monique.
Thank you, Fred. Today we will be discussing in detail the requirements of the Notice of Funding and Availability, also known as the NOFA, for the ICDBG program. Today's PowerPoint will be available on the Office of Native American Programs main webpage under FY 2017 ICDBG NOFA information. Today we will be discussing the following: the purpose and overview of the ICDBG program, what's new for FY 17, eligibility and requirements, and the NOFA criteria for this program, which includes 3 phases: screening, threshold, and rating and ranking. The purpose of the program is the development of viable Indian and Alaska Native communities, including the creation of decent housing, suitable living environments, and the economic opportunities primarily for low and moderate income persons. The regulation for this program can be found at 24 CFR 1003. Please refer to the link below to access it. The next 2 slides are the changes that have been made to this year's NOFA. Some key changes include the definition of tribal resolution, the modification to Southwest ONAP's project ceiling, a new subfactor added to rating factor 2 entitled unfunded applicant, which is in subfactor 2.3, and in rating factor 4, the requirements on how Indian housing block grants must be described and committed to count as leverage was clarified from the previous year. NOFA modifications, A few modifications were made on April 10th, 2017 to the ICDBG NOFA that was originally published on March 9th, 2017. The first modification talks about a correction of points made to rating factor 4, leveraging resources. That is incorrect. Instead, the change was made to rating factor 5, comprehensiveness and coordination, from 10 points in FY16 to 6 points under this NOFA. The modified NOFA is correct. The summary was the only thing that was incorrect. In Section 3 of the NOFA, the link was updated to reflect the 2017 BIA publication for eligible participants. In Section 5, Factor 3, Soundness of Approach, the total points are 34, not 36. The last modification deals with a new form that was added to the application package in FY 2017, the SF424 Project Performance Form. The form was originally added as a required form, but around April 13th, 2017 was changed to optional. Given that this form is now optional, I strongly encourage all applicants that have submitted an application prior to April 13th, 2017 to resubmit their application. Do not worry about having more than one application submitted for the same applicant. HUD will only review the last submitted application for an applicant. Please contact your area ONAP office if you have any additional questions. Applications are due May 18th, 2017 at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. Be mindful of your local time zone. At this time, Congress has not appropriated funds for this program. As more information is available, it will be communicated through the area ONAP offices. Now I will turn it over to Fred, who will talk about the types of grants for this program.
There are two types of grants allocated from the ICDBG grant. Single-purpose grants and imminent threat grants. Single-purpose are the competitive grants used for community development purposes. The imminent threat grants are awarded on a first-come, first-served basis and are used to alleviate or remove imminent threats to health or safety of tribal residents. Right now, I will briefly highlight some high-level points of the imminent threat grant. However, please reference the program guidance on the previous slide for more information. Given that the imminent threat grants are first come, first served, before sending an application to apply, please contact your area ONAP to confirm the following things: if there is money available, if the activity you are applying for qualifies, and what information you need to submit. The grant ceiling for imminent threat grants are $450,000 and $900,000, specifically for those that are presidentially declared disasters. The next two slides are the criteria that must be met and forms required to apply for the imminent threat grant. Some examples of imminent threat grants are asbestos removal, replacement of a failed water system, home repairs from floods, mold remediation, not recurring uranium in wells. Please refer to Program Guidance 2017/01 for additional information on imminent threat grants. As stated previously, single-purpose grants are competitive grant used for community development purposes. Today's training is going to focus on these grants. Here are a few key ICDBG definitions. Once again, the definition for tribal resolution is new this year. Tribal resolution is the formal manner in which the tribal government expresses its legislative will in accordance with its organic documents. Eligible applicants for this program are Native American tribal governments and Native American tribal organizations. You must be eligible as an Indian tribe or a tribal organization as required in the regulations by the application due date. A tribe can apply for the funds and have someone else to be the subrecipient of the grant and implement it. Individuals cannot apply to this program. As previously stated, a modification to the NOFA was published on April 10th, 2017 to reflect the 2017 Bureau of Indian Affairs list of eligible Indian entities. Please refer to the link on this slide for a complete listing. To be determined a tribal organization, you must have a letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs or Indian Health Services. Don't assume, be sure to check with your area office. If you have submitted it in the past, you do not have to submit it again. Here are the grant ceilings for this year for the area ONAP offices. The ceilings are consulted with the offices. This year, the ceilings in the Southwest region was modified. This slide shows the housing rehab cost limits for each region. There cannot be more than these cost limits towards housing rehab. Period of performance. The money for grants awarded under this NOFA must be spent by September 15th, 2024. If you do not make progress on your grant, HUD has the right to recapture the funds. There is no match for ICDBG. Points are awarded for leverage. You will receive points for rating factor 4 if you bring non-ICDBG funds to the table. ICDBG can be used as match for other programs when it can show that the other program is consistent with ICDBG's purposes.
We will now discuss the threshold requirements. both related to HUD and those specifically pertained to ICDBG. The thresholds that we will be discussing are HUD threshold requirements that are found in the general section NOFA, program-related ICDBG thresholds and project-specific thresholds and requirements, all of which appear in this NOFA. Remember, not all projects have thresholds or requirements. These HUD thresholds are located in the general section NOFA and on pages 9 and 10 of the 2017 ICDBG NOFA. There are two main thresholds that HUD requires to be met before you can even be considered for competitive grants. They are timely submissions and resolution of civil rights matters. If your application is received after the deadline date, even by 1 minute, you do not meet the qualifications for the grace period, you will automatically be disqualified. Again, please be mindful of your time zone. The next one is the outstanding civil rights matters that must be resolved by the application deadline date of this NOFA. If it is confirmed that you have an unresolved civil rights matter, you will automatically be disqualified. For more information on these threshold requirements, please refer to the link on this slide to access the general section NOFA. Next, we will discuss in detail the ICDBG program and project-related thresholds. Outstanding ICDBG obligation. As a program threshold, you cannot have any outstanding ICDBG obligations. This information will be within each ONAP region. Next is untimely closeout. If you have an ICDBG grant open 2 or more years past the closeout due date, according to your latest approved implementation schedule, which is the HUD 4125, then your application will not be reviewed. So the project-specific thresholds identified in the NOFA are for 2 project types only. The first is the new housing construction. You can only use ICDBG funding to build new housing if you have an established community-based development organization, also known as a CBDO. If ONAP has determined that you have an eligible CBDO, there is no need to submit the documentations. However, if you have not yet asked for your approval of the CBDO, it is suggested that you provide the documentation to your area office prior to submission of your application. In the past, a CBDO request was submitted within the application and resulted in a fundable application, but not an approved CBDO. There are 3 criteria that you have to demonstrate or show as the NOFA states in your application. Number 1, no other housing is suitable. The source documentation could be a Zillow internet printout to show homes in the local city or county are high in price, which is financial unfeasible for the LMI family. Number 2, and no other sources, including IHBG, can meet the needs. Here you can identify that the most current IHP in Section 5 of the budgets has all of its funds allocated out to other activities or needs. You can also include the current FY budget that identifies funds are allocated or even expended at the time of application. Number 3, and you can pick one of the last 3 options. If you choose that rehab is not economically feasible, you can demonstrate this by documentation that the house is near being condemned or to just rehab will not bring to standard based on the cost estimates. If you choose overcrowding, this can be demonstrated by a waiting list that shows the second family in the home is waiting for a home, or the last option of no current residents, again, can be demonstrated by showing this person is on the waiting list for housing of some sort. You must show these elements in your application. A simple statement will not suffice. Note page 18 of the NOFA identifies that under submission of applications under housing rehab and new housing, a statement that the applicant has adopted housing or construction standards. This is no longer a threshold component. If not submitted, it can be treated as a curable deficiency. Next is the economic development. This is the second program and project related threshold. If you are requesting funding for this type of project, you must provide a financial analysis prepared by a qualified party. Here are some key things that your financial analysis must demonstrate. In addition to the items on the previous slide, the analysis must establish to the extent practicable these following things. Next, HUD or federal requirements. In order to be awarded HUD funds, you must be in compliance with these requirements identified on this slide and the next slide. There is one point I want to elaborate on. Number 7, code of conduct. If you have a current code of conduct posted on the HUD website, you do not need to submit it with your application. If a code of conduct is not on file with HUD or in the application, you will be required to submit before entering into an agreement with HUD. Next is the ICDBG program-specific requirements. These are several requirements that you must comply with if you are awarded an ICDBG. They are located on page 16 of the NOFA. We will take a moment to discuss each of them now. The first one is Indian preference. ONAP's guidance is that Indian preference overrules Section 3, and you can simply describe how you are complying with Indian preference and Section 3. For land acquisition projects, if Section 3 doesn't apply, then you need to state that in your application. Reminder, if you have other information in your application that is not included in the narrative for rating factor 3.1, be sure to make reference to it under this section or state the attachment number where the additional information can be found. Next is the housing rehabilitation project requirement. Under housing rehab, you must state that you have adopted your rehab policies. The reference in the NOFA is incorrect. There actually isn't one. And number 2, you must also provide a written statement that the home buyers you plan to assist are either current in payments or in a repayment agreement. Next is new housing construction requirement. If you are submitting an application for new housing construction, you must state that you have a current, in effect, tribal resolution adopting and identifying construction standards that meet the requirements of Section 3C3 found on page 11 of this NOFA. Notice that the language for housing rehab requires only a statement adopting rehab policies versus the new housing, which requires a resolution adopting and identifying construction standards. Again, I want to reiterate the program and project specific thresholds and that we talked about earlier. If you fail to address the threshold requirements for new housing construction or economic development, your application will not get rated. Next is public services. Keep in mind that this cannot be a standalone project. It is limited to 15% of the total grant request. It does not need to be related to the project activity in your application. You can find more on that in the regulations at 1003.201E. Infrastructure projects. These are projects that will support future housing and community development projects. You must submit evidence that the entire project that the infrastructure project is designed for must be completed in 3 years of the grant award. Next is eligible activities. This is a list of eligible activities that are acceptable under this NOFA that you can apply for. A complete description of these activities can be found at 24 CFR Part 1004, Subpart C. Eligibility of government facilities. Some eligible facilities include police stations, jails, libraries, and some of the ineligible facilities include courthouses, local government offices, and other government headquarters. Next is ineligible activities. Here are some of the ineligible activities for the ICDBG program, but a complete list can also be found at 24 CFR 1003.207. Next, we talk about submissions for all projects. This slide identifies forms and documentations that must be submitted by all applicants for all ICDBG projects. There are a few of these forms and or documentations that I want to expand on. The first being the narrative for rating factors. We would like you to provide a one-page summary or abstract of your project, something brief to help the reviewers understand what they are about to read in your application. If you are requesting funds for more than one type of ICDBG eligible project, then you must include a one-page summary or abstract for each. And of course, you'll need to address all 5 rating factors in the NOFA. We have talked about this form several times now, but as they say, the third time's the charm. Of course, I'm talking about the SF 424 Project Performance Site Location Form. As a reminder, the application package on grants.gov was modified to include this form as an optional form. All applicants applying for the ICDBG program must re-download the application package. Any previous package downloaded prior to April 13, 2017 will be rejected with errors upon submission. Next is the budget information. If you are proposing more than one project in your application, you must include a separate HUD 4123 for each project. Planning and administrative costs cannot exceed 20% of each grant. It may only be funded in conjunction with a physical development activity. Next is citizens' participation. You must submit a tribal resolution that states that you have considered the views of the community in preparing your application. If you are a tribal organization, you must submit a resolution from the tribe certifying that citizens' participation was adhered to. It is our experience that CEPs have been submitted prior to applications, or the resolution was not submitted by tribe but by the tribal organization. This is a program-specific requirement. If this is incorrect, your application will not be submitted for review. Next is low and moderate income, also known as LMI benefit. And finally, the intent of the program is to benefit LMI persons. Your application needs to demonstrate that at least 70% of the grant funds will be used for activities to benefit the LMI persons. If your activity is for any type of housing-related activities such as construction, rehab, housing assistance, then 100% of grant funds must benefit the LMI persons. LMI will be discussed in greater detail later in rating factor 2. Aside from the project performance site location form, all other forms and documents listed must be submitted by the applicant. If not submitted, this information cannot be requested as a deficiency. Next, we'll talk about submissions for certain projects. Unlike the previous slide, the next 2 slides will identify submissions for certain projects. some of which may be requested as a deficiency if not submitted or submitted with incomplete information, such as the code of conduct or the disclosure of lobbying forms. Other documentation listed here cannot be requested as a deficiency if not submitted with the original application. If you are a tribal organization who got approved for the tribe to submit the application, then you must include a resolution from the tribe saying that they gave you the okay to do so on their behalf. Some of the language in the NOFA may be confusing as it relates to housing rehabilitation and housing construction. Please refer to project-specific requirements on page 16 of the NOFA for these two projects. I do want to point out, however, that housing rehab and new housing projects, you must in a statement identify that as a tribe or tribal organization that you have adopted housing or construction standards. For housing rehab, you must submit a statement adopting housing policies. For new housing, you must submit a statement that by resolution you've adopted and identified housing or construction standards. So, just to recap and make sure that we are all on the same page, for housing rehab projects, you need the following: the statement adopting rehab policies, a statement about home buyers payments, and a statement that housing standards were adopted. For new housing construction projects, you need the following: a statement that you have current, in effect, tribal resolution adopting, and identifying construction standards. Number 2, a statement that construction standards have been adopted. Also, be mindful that this section we are discussing submission for certain projects. You need to pay attention to the requirements under the applicable rating factors. The information here in this section does not address all rating factor components. For example, the bullet with land acquisition, this is just a reminder under the submission items that you need to establish a reasonable ratio between the number of acres and the number of LMI persons to benefit from this project. This information should be addressed in your rating factors. If it is not addressed, most likely you will not get the maximum points or possibly a 0 for not addressing this criteria. Again, this section is just to reiterate the submission items for certain projects. We will continue talking about the submission for certain projects. If you're applying for a healthcare facility where the Indian Health Service would provide the healthcare services, you must include a statement that the facility will meet all IHS facility requirements. There may be other facility standards that apply based on your contracting services. If this is the case, then the tribe must assure that these other facility standards compare to the nationally accepted minimum standards. If you're applying for a correction or juvenile center that DOJ or BIA will fund and provide the correctional services, then you must include a statement that the facility meets the applicable BIA or DOJ standards regarding the correctional operations, programs, and designs. If you have partners in your project, or what we most commonly see are service providers in your public facilities projects, then you must have a signed letter from the entity committing the funds. This will be discussed further in rating factor 3. As stated previously, if your code of conduct is on HUD's website, you do not need to submit. If there has been any changes or if it's not on the website, then we highly encourage that you submit it with your application. Finally, the Form SF LLL Disclosure of lobbying activities is only needed if you are a state or TDHE established under state law.
Now it is time for the fun part. We have explained the program, its uses and requirements. Now it is time to dive into the rating factors and go into detail about the things in which your application will be rated on. There are 5 ratings factors. 1, capacity of the applicant. 2, need, extent of the problem. 3, soundness of approach. 4, leveraging resources. 5, comprehensiveness and coordination. Here is the rating table, also found on page 24 and page 25 of the NOFA, which shows the point value for each rating factor and subfactor. The first rating factor is capacity of the applicant. The maximum points for this rating factor is 30. To be considered for funding, you have to score at least 15 points in this rating factor. Subfactor 1, managerial, technical, and administrative capacity. Current grantees can score up to 15 points in this factor, whereas new applicants can score up to 30 points. This factor focuses on managerial, technical, and administrative capacity to carry out the proposed project. Subfactor 1.1.A, managerial and technical staff. You could score up to 8 points, regardless if you are current or new. To be successful in this subfactor, you must do the following. Clearly demonstrate roles and responsibilities and the knowledge/experience of project director and all individual key staff. 2, clearly demonstrate the experience of all key staff that is relevant, either to the proposed project or the role. Recent within the 5 past years. Successful, providing a brief description of past project, target closeout date, and actual closeout date. To get 8 points, you must clearly describe. That means requirements addressed are easy to follow and to understand. All staff identified by the applicant will be considered key staff. Key staff do not include construction contractors, but they do include consultants that will help administer the grant if they are a key staff member. HUD staff will not question if key staff are missing. Applicant is responsible for identifying the key staff. The applicant may use other terms for project director, and this is okay for point award as long as the description is clear that this person will be in charge with day-to-day responsibilities. The program manager doesn't have to be listed first on the list. If all key members work on the same project, they can all use the same project for successful if it meets the criteria for success. 4 points. Adequately described means requirements are addressed, are vague or unclear. Roles and responsibilities, knowledges and experience, and relevant must be described for all staff. Each individual key staff may either be recent or successful, but both can't be missing for any individual key staff member to get 4 points. Successful is just a statement that past projects completed timely or ahead of schedule. 2 points. Describe means requirements addressed have missing information. Roles and responsibilities, knowledges and experiences, and relevant experience is described for most of the individual staff. Most individual key staff are either recent or successful, but not both missing. Same criteria as 4 points, except for most, not all staff. 0 points. You did not describe the roles and responsibilities and the knowledges or experiences of the project director and all individual key staff. Subfactor 1.1.B, implementation plan. New applicants can score up to 8 points, and current grantees could score up to 3 points in this subfactor. Within this subfactor, tasks with subtasks will constitute as detailed. Underway could be when force account construction starts, construction contract award, starting homebuyer education, or when escrow opens, land and housing acquisitions. According to page 8 of the NOFA, the expected award date is September 14th, 2017, and 180 days from expected award is 6 months, which is about March 2018. 3 or 8 points. Detailed breakdown of all tasks. This means each major task is identified along with subtasks. For example, construction, publish IFB, bid, opening, select contractor, construction start date, etc. 2 or 5 points. Major tasks mean those identified without any subtasks. For example, environmental, construction, closeout, and audit. 0 points. If no plan, blank implementation schedule, and no narrative, no major task provided. Subfactor 1.1.c, financial management. New applicants can score up to 7 points, and current grantees can get up to 2 points. Any reference to Part 85 will be determined in non-compliance. They must reference Part 200. 2 or 7 points. Clearly describes means it is easy to follow and understand. Must identify the responsible entity for FM. Must reference compliance with 2 CFR 200 and 24 CFR 1003. No FM findings in current audit if auditor identifies a finding or deficiency under the FM section, then 0 points. If audit identifies a finding or deficiency under federal programs and related to procurement, then there's 0 points. Doesn't have to be a HUD program. If no audit, entities not grantees, IPA letter is included in the application and dated within the last 12 months. IPA letter does not have to cite regulations. If no audit is required, an affirmative statement must be included. Reviewer will not consider the timeliness of the audit submission since it will be addressed under past performance. 1 or 4 points, adequately described, vague and unclear. Does not describe the responsible entity for FM. Does not identify 2 CFR 200 and 24 CFR 1003. No FM findings in current audit if there's no audit. IPA letter is included in the application and dated within the last 12 months. If not audit required, affirmative statement included. This statement was accidentally omitted from the NOFA, however, it aligns with the other requirements in the NOFA under the rating factor. The area offices are encouraged to require affirmative statement for 4 points. Only difference is in point level is the description. The reviewer will not consider timeliness of audit in assessing these points. 0 points, no description. FM findings in current audit. No IPA letter, no affirmative statement, 0 points. Referenced 24 CFR 85 instead of 2 CFR 200, 0 points. Subfactor 1.1.d, procurement and contract management. New applicants can get up to 7 points and current grantees can get up to 2 points. To clarify the NOFA for this subfactor, if there is no current audit, a letter from the IPA must be included in the application. 2 or 7 points. Clearly described means it is easy to follow and understand. The factor will be evaluated the same as the FM factor. Please see above. Must identify the responsible entity for the procurement and contract management. Must reference compliance with 2 CFR 200 and 24 CFR 1003. No procurement findings in the current audit. If auditor identifies a finding or deficiency under procurement section, then 0 points. If audit identifies a finding or deficiency under federal programs and related to procurement, then 0 points. Doesn't have to be a HUD program. If no audit, responsible entities, not the grantees, IPA letter is included in the application and dated within the last 12 months. IPA letter does not have to state the specific regulations, but should not state 24 CFR 85. If not audit required, an affirmative statement must be included. Reviewer will not consider the timeliness of the audit submission since this will be addressed under past performance. 1 or 4 points. Adequately described means the information provided was vague or unclear, does not identify a responsible entity, no reference to 2 CFR 200 or 24 CFR 1003, no procurement findings in current audit. If not audit, responsible entities IPA letter include and is dated within past 12 months from application due date. If no audit required, affirmative statement is included. Reviewer will not consider timeliness of audit submission. This is addressed under past performance. 0 points. No description or states in compliance with 24 CFR 85. Procurement finding in current audit. If not a current audit, no IPA letter references 24 CFR Part 85. If not audit required, no affirmative statement. Subfactor 2, past performance. This subfactor is only for current grantees and they could score up to 15 points. The past performance section that I will be talking about is only for those grantees that are considered to be current grantees. This means the grantee has an open ICDBG grant or one that was closed during the 12-month rating period. The 12-month rating period is the 12 months prior to the application deadline, so it includes March 18, 2016 through March 18, 2017. Grantees do not need to respond to the past performance rating factors, and there is nothing you can do to change the points. The HUD reviewer will be using HUD records to score these factors. The past performance section is the only section that is initially rated by your area office. Subfactor 1.2.A, implementation and disbursements. Current grantees are rated based on how they perform on grants 12 months prior to the application due date. ICDBG grants include imminent threat and mold grants open during the 12-month period. This factor is looking at 2 things. 1, to see if your open grants are current with the last approved implementation schedule, and 2, to evaluate the balance of grants funds that remain in locks. Implementation schedule portion. When we evaluate if your open ICDBG grants met their implementation schedule timeframes, we are only looking at your ICDBG grants, including imminent threat and ICDBG mold grants. If your grant was closed during the 12-month rating period, it will not be included in this portion of the subfactor. Performance is based on the current implementation schedule and not prior versions. Performance is evaluated as of the application deadline. So we will look at your implementation schedule, see where it says your progress should be as of May 2017. If you are on schedule with all of your open ICDBG grants, we will then review the locks balance. If you are not on schedule with all of your open ICDBG grants, then you will get 0 points and we won't even look at the locks portion of the subfactor. The locks portion will include all ICDBG grants, including imminent threat and ICDBG mold grants that were open and are closed during the 12-month rating period, except ICDBG grants awarded during the 12-month rating period will not be included in the locks evaluation. 1.2.B, reports. Include grants that were closed during rating period and had reports due during the rating period regardless of when the grants were awarded. This subfactor looks at the annual status and evaluation reports, or ACERs, and the SF-4025 reports that were all due for all open and closed ICDBG grants during the rating period. To get the maximum 2 points, all your ACERs and all your SF-425 reports must be submitted on time during the 12-month reporting period. No leeway given. Reports must be submitted by due date. ACERs due November 15th, 2015. SF 425s due 30 days after each quarter on July 30th, 2015, October 30th, 2015, January 30th, 2016, and March 30th, 2016. If received on the 31st, then it is late, unless 30 days ends on a weekend, and then that could be submitted the next Monday. 1.2.c, closeouts. For the closeout subfactor, we look to see if you submitted your closeout documents on time per the ICDBG regulations. Grants that should have been closed because the requirements for the closeout were met, or grants that were closed during the rating period will only be evaluated in this factor. Closeout documents due date 90 days is based on the completion date in the closeout documents. Closeout document receipt date is the date HUD receives the final ACER, regardless if the closeout documents are complete or accurate. Closeout document must be submitted after the criteria for the closeout has been met. If closeout documents were submitted and still not corrected in a timely manner, then they will not be considered timely within 90 days of the submission. 1.2.d, audits. Applicants are rated on this factor based on the submission of annual audits. We will look to see that you submitted your last 2 audits on time. If both audits were submitted timely, you get 3 points. If not, you get no points. Audits are due 9 months after the fiscal year end or 30 days after completion of the audit, whichever is earlier. We will check the Federal Audit Clearinghouse website for the receipt date. Extensions vary across ONAP offices. Some area ONAP offices no longer give extensions. 1.2.e, findings. This factor looks to see if your ICDBG, and added this year, your IHBG monitoring and audit findings were resolved on time. If you have no findings are due during the rating period, or if you've resolved all of your findings within their target completion date, you get the maximum 3 points. Otherwise, you get 0 points. Findings that are considered resolved in an audit, even though they are repeat findings in next audit, are still considered resolved for the specific audit they were in. Only considered control, ICDBG, or IHBG monitoring or audit findings, and we only look at final monitoring and audit reports, not drafts. Your total score for RF1 must be no less than 15 points, or your application will not be considered any further. If your application receives a minimum score of 15 points, then the reviewer will continue to rate rating factors 2 through 5. As you can see, it is really important to administer your existing ICDBG grants in accordance with the requirements because they can seriously affect the funding of future applications. Please work with your grant staff to ensure they understand the repercussions on the rating factors of future applications.
Now we will talk about rating factor 2, the need and extent of the problem. The maximum points in this rating factor is 24. The rating factor has 3 subfactors for which you can receive points. The first looks at how well you demonstrate the need for your project. The second requires you to document your project benefit and show how your project benefits the neediest segment of the population. And the third is to allow grantees that have applied in the past 3 award cycles but have not been funded additional points. Next, rating factor 2.1, the need and viability. Applicants can receive up to 6 points for this subfactor. Applicants must describe the element in this slide. A simple statement will not be sufficient. Pay close attention to the language in the NOFA and what it is asking for. This factor requires more than just a statement of the criteria. If you just include a statement, the application will not meet the NOFA requirements for point awards. You need to describe and demonstrate. One way to demonstrate need is quantitatively. For maximum points, you also must demonstrate and address how your project is critical to the viability of the community. You, as a grantee, will define what a viable community is. You tell us in your application why the project is critical to the viability of your community. This can be related to cultural, social, or even economic needs. One other point, make sure the information in your application is consistent. If your application states you have a need for a 150,000 gallon water tank and your application includes the purchase of a 200,000 gallon water tank or a 100,000 gallon water tank with no explanation for the difference, you have not demonstrated the project meets an essential community development need. Inconsistencies in the application can also affect point award and other rating factors. Next, subfactor 2.2, project benefit. The next subfactor is where you address who the beneficiaries of your project are and how your project benefits the neediest segment of the population. This is what HUD staff commonly refers to as the low and moderate income benefit or LMI benefit. Applicants can receive up to 12 points for this subfactor. You have two ways to document project benefit. Number one, using the published data provided by HUD from the census data, use the link found in the NOFA and on this slide. Number two, you can use your own data by conducting a survey. The criteria to address project benefit and the calculation to demonstrate project benefit is different for each type of project you will be submitting. So please review the NOFA requirements carefully. Although the NOFA states that if you fail to include all components listing, ONAP will use information from the census. Be advised that if your project is not an area-wide project, the data from the census will not be applicable. For example, if you are building a Head Start, TANF building, or a nursing home that is considered a limited clientele project, thereby the census will not identify limited clientele data. This will be determined and reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Next, subfactor 2.2, public facilities and improvements. Applicants can receive up to 12 points for this subfactor. These are the community buildings and infrastructure type projects. Please note that housing infrastructure was incorrectly listed in the NOFA under 2.2C along with new construction. It belongs here and will be rated in this subfactor. These types of projects are considered to have an area-wide benefit. To demonstrate the low and moderate income or LMI benefit for a project with an area-wide benefit, you utilize either the published data or your own survey as we just discussed. Submit the most recent data available from the U.S. Census Bureau. Submitted unpublished data by conducting your own survey, or in certain limited circumstances, your project may serve a limited clientele. All required documentation must be included in the application to be awarded any points. For a limited clientele, you must demonstrate LMI benefit can on case-by-case basis use program policies or resolution to certify percentage of LMI benefit. Example, nursing home with 10 beds. The nursing home policy states 8 of the 10 beds are limited to LMI persons. If the application is demonstrating the building is limited to LMI persons for Head Start or TANF. Demographic data and accompanying information is not required since the income limits for such programs are already known. Next is subfactor 2.2b, economic development projects. Applicants can receive up to 12 points for this subfactor. Beneficiaries are persons served, employed by the project, jobs created or retained. You have two options to demonstrate the LMI benefit under economic development projects. Persons served by the project using the same information we just went over for published and unpublished demographic data for public facilities, or the number of LMI persons employed by the project and jobs created or retained because of the project. To document persons employed by the project, you must describe the nature and number of the projects created or retained for LMI people. This information includes, but is not limited to, a brief description of proposed job responsibilities, job titles, salaries, and the number of full-time equivalent positions. If jobs will be retained as a result of the ICDBG project, you must include information that shows clearly and objectively that jobs will be lost without the ICDBG project. Jobs that are retained only for the period of the grant will not count under this rating factor. They must be permanent jobs. Now we'll talk about subfactor 2.2c, new housing construction, housing rehabilitation, housing acquisition to support new housing, and home ownership assistance projects. Applicants can receive up to 12 points for this subfactor. Remember, housing infrastructure will not be rated here, but in 2.2a, public facilities and infrastructure. The data for this subfactor is based on FY16 IHBG data because FY17 funds were not allocated at the time of publication for this NOFA. Next is subfactor 2.2d, which is microenterprise programs. Applicants can receive up to 12 points for this subfactor. The point structure on page 30 of the NOFA for this subfactor is incorrect. This is the correct structure, which is identical to all point structures in rating factor 2.2. A microenterprise is a business that has 5 or fewer employees, one or more of whom owns the business. The owners of the microenterprise must be LMI, and the majority of the jobs created or retained must be for LMI persons. Jobs retained only for the period of the grant will not count. You do not need to submit demographic data statement and accompanying documents when demonstrating LMI benefits by job creation or retention. Next is subfactor 2.3, unfunded applicants. This subfactor is new this year to the NOFA. The intent of this subfactor is to reach those tribes and TDHEs that have applied consecutively over the past 3 years and have received a fundable score, which is at least 70 points, but due to the competitiveness of this program, did not receive funding. To get a maximum 6 points, you would have to have an application rated over 70 points, not funded, for 2014, 2015, and 2016. For 4 points, you applied during 2015 and 16. You were rated at or above 70 points, but not funded. For 2 points, you applied during 2016 and was rated at or above 70, but was not funded. If you applied in 2014, you were rated at or above 70 and not funded, and not in 2015, but then applied again in 2016, rated over 70 points, but was not funded, you will only get 2 points for applying in 2016 and rated at or above the 70 points, but not funded. If you only applied in 2015, you were rated at or above 70 points but not funded, you will receive 0 points. If you need further clarification on this subfactor, I highly encourage you to check with your local ONAP office for further clarification. Next is rating factor 3, soundness of approach. The maximum points for this subfactor is 34. The purpose of this factor is to address the quality and effectiveness of the project to enhance community viability, meet identified needs, and to sustain the project. Subfactor 3.1, description and rationale for the project. Describe project in detail. This means to be very descriptive when describing your project. Ensure that the reviewers have a clear understanding of what your project involves. The size can be the square foot of the homes or the number of bedrooms, the linear footage, water tank size by gallons, etc. But you can't just say you will rehab 40 homes or build one community center. The type could be a type of building, a type of construction, and material used, single family, multifamily, the type of infrastructure, water, electric, underground or above ground, wastewater, etc. Location can be an address, a parcel number, the GPS coordinates, map, or aerial photo. Do not say simply that it is adjacent to the tribal offices. Describe how the project is feasible and cost effective, such as the tribe considered 2 options for the proposed project. Number 1, the purchase of a raw feed simple land in the area with an average price of $20,000 per acre. Parcels were not easily accessible to water, power, and sewer, and the tribe would have to pay extremely high property taxes until the land could be converted to trust land, unless a reasonable cooperation agreement could be reached with the county. Or number 2, the land owned by the tribe held in trust. The latter choice was determined to be the most cost-effective and feasible due to this site is already owned by the tribe, is close to tribal amenities, has water, power, sewer, and roads close by, and the tribe would have direct site control over the project, etc. Describe the rationale for your project design. Number 1, modular construction will save time and money without compromising the quality of the facility. Number 2, doing stick building because manufactured homes didn't last as long. Number 3, we're doing underground electric lines because overhead is more costly to maintain, etc. Cost savings. If your project is for housing construction, rehab, or public facility buildings, you will describe the cost savings and show the savings in quantitative terms, either by percent or dollar amount. For example, number 1, the facility will use modular construction to save 10 to 20% on average construction costs as compared to on-site stick construction, according to www.modularhomeowner.com. Number 2, you could also provide quantifiable information for energy efficient construction materials used that will lead to a cost savings in the future. The purchase of land for future housing. You need to establish that there is a reasonable ratio between the number of acres to be acquired and the number of LMI households to be served. For example, you want to purchase 10 acres of land and will only construct 5 homes. We may think this is not a reasonable ratio unless you explain that 6 of the acres are undevelopable due to steep hillsides. You need to describe why the ratio of net usable acres for your project is reasonable. Section 3, or Indian preference. Again, ONAP's guidance is that Indian preference overrules Section 3. A grantee can respond to this prompt describing how they will comply with Indian preference and Section 3. Next is subfactor 3.2, budget and cost estimates. On page 31 of the ICDBG NOFA, it explains what you must and can submit for this subfactor. You must submit the cost summary form, HUD 4123, and it is highly encouraged to supplement that with a narrative. Bullet 1, ensure that your budget is reasonable and accurately reflects construction costs for your area. If the project is not for construction, state the type of project, such as housing acquisition and costs for the area, housing rehab and costs for the area, etc. Bullet 2 and 3, cost summary and the narrative does not have to identify P&A matching funds if not counted towards leveraging, or if no P&A is being charged to the ICDBG funds. However, you must state who is paying for it. In bullets 4 and 5, describe the recent relevant experience and qualifications of the persons who prepared the budgets, including P&A for similar projects. In bullet number 6, if your application includes a public service, the budget must also include a breakdown of those costs and describe what they are for. For more information on public services can be found on page 16 of the ICDBG NOFA. Reminder, if there are inconsistencies in your budget, information and cost summary will lose points. When it comes to the budget, we will look at all things budget related to determine accuracy. However, you should still make reference to any pertinent information in this subfactor so that it is not overlooked. Next is subfactor 3.3, commitment to sustain projects. Subfactor 3.3a, public facilities, improvements, and projects. So to get a maximum of 10 points, you will need to address all of the bullets on this slide. You need to address that all 5 components of the M&O plan are described. These 5 things include maintenance, repairs, capital improvement or replacement reserves, insurance, and security. When addressing these 5 components, you'll also need to include a cost breakdown of the annual expenses. For infrastructure projects, may only have 3 of the 5 items described. For example, maintenance, repairs, and replacement reserves for the maximum points. For buildings and public facilities, you must demonstrate operating funds committed for recreational, social, or other services. If services provided by sole source, like an electric company, then we don't need a letter from the sole source if you explain it is a sole source. Letters of commitment from outside service providers must be included that identify the operating expenses and space needs. If the applicant is providing the services, then a statement is sufficient that the applicant is providing operating funds for services and does not have to address expenses or space needs. If the applicant is not the tribe and the tribe is committing operating funds, then a need resolution or a letter of commitment, and it must address space needs and expenses. Subfactor 3.3b, new housing construction, housing rehabilitation, housing acquisition, and home ownership assistance projects. If you are applying for these things, then to receive the maximum points, you will need to, number 1, provide a detail of the maintenance and insurance responsibilities of the applicant and or participant, and number 2, you need to state who will be paying for the maintenance and insurance. Applicants can include a sample home buyer agreement in the application. The narrative in the agreement still needs to describe the maintenance and insurance responsibilities of the applicant and or the participant. Subfactor 3.3C, economic development. For an economic development project, to get the maximum points, you will need to describe why the project is needed in its market or area, describe how the project will operate, and describe how and why the project will succeed. And you need to provide evidence that the project's chance for financial success is excellent. This information is from your feasibility study, your market study, and the financial analysis. You will need to reiterate in the narrative or refer us to the sections in the market study, the feasibility study, or your financial analysis that you provided the requested information. Don't just include the documents and expect the reviewer to search for the information. Evidence of excellent or reasonable change for financial success needs to be concluded in the business plan or feasibility study. Identify where this statement in conclusion is provided. We will not pull this information out of the studies. Subfactor 3.3D, microenterprise programs. For those who are doing a microenterprise program, you'll need to describe the 3 criteria to receive maximum points. Number 1, the application must describe the microenterprise program, including the types of assistance offered to microenterprise applicants and the types of entities eligible to apply for such assistance. Number 2, it must explain how the applicant will analyze the microenterprise applicant's business plans, market studies, and financial feasibilities. And for number 3, you will need to provide evidence that the chance for success of your microenterprise program is excellent. If there are credit programs, describe how the applicant will determine the loan terms. Subfactor 3.3E, land acquisition projects to support new housing. To be successful in this rating factor, you must address all the bullet points on this slide. This assessment must be prepared by a qualified entity. Your application must demonstrate that 100% of all units will be constructed within 2 years after site purchase. Note, no funding commitment is required, but you do need to discuss and explain the plan in your application. Rating factor 4, leveraging resources. A maximum of 8 points will be awarded based on the percentage of non-ICDBG funds relative to the total project costs. In leveraging resources, this slide identifies the allowable non-ICDBG resources. Please note that this list is not finite. There may be other sources of non-ICDBG leverage as unique as a particular project. Continuing on to leveraging resources, this slide identifies the disallowed resources that are not considered leverageable. The evidence and documentation of leveraging resources must be submitted with the application in Factor 4 or reference attachment. For tribal resources, a written statement identifying and committing tribal funds, approved IHP on file with resources committed, or written commitment for future IHBG funds at the time of the application. The current IHP must reflect the commitment of funds identified in the application. An application for ICDBG funding cannot amend IHP after submission of the ICDBG application to get points for the section of your ICDBG application. Other leveraging requirements to be aware of include environmental review requirements in 24 CFR 58, which applies to the commitment or use of all funds, ICDBG, or other leverage. If you cannot get a firm commitment of the non-tribal funds by the application deadline date, then you must include a statement from the contributing entity that describes why the firm commitment cannot be made at this current time, that the applicant's proposed project meets eligibility criteria for receiving the leverage funds, and a date by which the funding decision will be made. The date cannot be more than 6 months past the anticipated date of the grant approval by HUD. Awards anticipated by HUD on September 30th, 2017, with 6 months being through March 31st, 2018. Rating factor 5, comprehensiveness and coordination. For maximum points in this rating factor, the applicant must show that it has designed its project and plans in coordination with community members, tribal departments, or other agencies and organizations. It should be consistent with any tribal strategic comprehensive plans or goals and should address intended outputs and outcomes. Rating factor 5.1, coordination. For maximum points, this subfactor, the applicant must demonstrate and describe how activities follow or are consistent with any strategic plans or community goals. They must identify and describe how they will work with organizations not providing leveraging on the project. Future and past project coordination will be accepted. Tribal departments are accepted as tribal organizations. You must summarize citizen participation in development of the plan. It can either be addressed in this subfactor or the applicant can refer to a citizen participation draft in the resolution. The method must be described in either the narrative or the resolution. Subfactor 5.2, outputs and outcomes. This subfactor measures what the applicant hopes to achieve. It's used to monitor and assess the applicant's progress. Both are quantifiable measures or indicators that identify change in the community. The outputs are measured in terms of the volume of work accomplished. Be sure not to write the word number. Actually provide the number amount. Outcomes show impact that the applicant hopes to achieve with the proposed project. Use words such as reduce, increase, and improve. Next are our preference points. In order to get these points, the applicant would have had to already been approved. Please be sure to check the websites provided to confirm that you are eligible to receive these points before submitting the forms. Next is our review and selection process. Although this section is at the end of the NOFA, it identifies the process that the applications go through once they are screened. There are just a few things that I want to point out as it relates to a few of these steps identified here. The ranking. All types of projects are ranked against all others. Next, I want to talk about tiebreakers real briefly. In the event that there is a tie, it is standardized across all ONAPs. Also, a project may be selected that can be fully funded over those that cannot. Next, technical deficiencies. Applicants will receive a letter to correct technical deficiencies and respond by the mandated deadline if there were errors or oversights that would not alter rating if corrected. As a part of the overall selection process, some other reasons an applicant may not be funded include no response or inadequate response received as a result of the deficiency letter. HUD also does a delinquent federal debt and name check review, failure to submit all required documents, failure to address all parts of thresholds and/or requirements, you do not receive enough points in rating factor 1, not enough points overall, which is 70 points, or there is not enough money to fund all applicants. Next is our anticipated award dates. Post-award reporting requirements. As stated on page 41 of the NOFA, these are post-award requirements that all grantees must abide by. Grants.gov. If you experience any problems while downloading or submitting your application, or if you have any problems, please contact grants.gov directly by using the information on this slide. Listed in this slide is the contact information for all 6 of our area ONAP offices. NOFA trainings. Please contact your ONAP area offices for specific information on the local NOFA trainings. To view this NOFA webcast again, you can easily access it by using the link under the second bullet. And lastly is the link of examples of the highest scoring applicants for the ICDBG program. Thank you so much for your time and interest in the FY17 ICDBG program. I wish you all the best.